Hello everybody, and welcome to my next Game of Thrones review. Now, the way I do my reviews, if you haven't watched the previous ones, I do it like you haven't seen all the episodes, just in case it is somebody who is watching the show for the first time and I don't want to give anything away. I don't usually do a lot of book comparisons at all because I watched the show before I ever got into the books, and I never read ahead. At this point, I'm still only halfway through book 2, so you don't have to worry about me giving away any book spoilers or anything like that. Like I said, I do the reviews like it's the first time you're watching the show. Even though most people have seen the show by this point, but just in case, you're safe if you haven't. Sometimes I do mention if something's important and you should pay attention to it. And what I do is I give some of the background when it relates to what they're talking about in the show at that point in time. But beyond that, I don't try to give away anything that's going to be happening in the future in case you hadn't watched it before. So anyway, this is going to be the 4th episode of Season 1. And it is called Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. And that refers to a lot of people in the show. The Cripples, obviously that would be Bran. Bastards, Jon, maybe some others. Broken Things, that could apply to almost everybody in the show. So the titles usually do relate to more than one aspect of the show. And this one, I think, is one of the most obvious examples of that. So this one, you saw a couple little quick flashes before the title. We start the episode actually this time with the first of Bran's dreams. And there's a few episodes that start with one of Bran's dreams. And the easiest, well, there's two giveaways when you're looking at the show, and you can tell that it's a dream of Bran's. One, of course, is that Bran is walking in his dreams because, in actuality, he's crippled and he can't walk any longer. And another aspect that lets you know that it's a dream is the Raven that we're going to meet in this for the first time. Now, the way it starts is Bran is walking through Winterfell. He's got his bow. It's basically, his ideal version of how he would like to be. Happy, healthy, learning to fight, what he always wanted to do. I believe they said in the last episode he wanted to be a Knight of the King's Guard. So it starts out with Bran's dream. And like I said, in this one is the first time we meet the Raven that you see a lot in his dreams. There's a lot of references to ravens and wolves when it's a Bran dream because of his connection to his wolf and a few other things that will have to do with the Raven. You'll see as you continue watching the show. And there's our Raven. And as you can see, he's following it somewhere. The Raven is leading him someplace. And the most interesting part of this dream, it's, other than you get the idea that he is being led somewhere by this Raven, there's also the reveal at the very end of, they show the Raven looking back at Bran, and you see that the Raven actually has 3 eyes. So there's that. I mean, that's when you first know, oh, this is something different. So, they're about the show here in the screen caps. I did the beginning a little different this time, where the screen cap started before the title. I'm playing with different ways to do it, so we'll see what works better. But when the Raven looks back at him, you see that it's revealed that the Raven has 3 eyes. So, that's some fun stuff. And then he's jarred so much by seeing this 3-eyed Raven, that's what wakes him out of his dream. And he's back in bed, back to being crippled, and back to his real life, so to speak. So, all we know is that this 3-eyed Raven is trying to lead Bran somewhere. So, that's that's all we really get from the dream at this point. But like I said, we'll see a lot more of Bran's dreams as the series progresses. And that's Old Man watching over him again. And this is the point when Theon Greyjoy, the Stark Sword, comes in, and he's basically running in to tell Bran that there's visitors, and Robb sent him to come and get Bran. And Bran doesn't want to go see anybody. He's still really depressed about his situation. And Theon's like trying to get him to leave, and he's like, well, you have to listen to Robb. Yes, Robb with 2 B's, as you can see in the captioning there. I don't know how many people realize Robb is 2 B's. They spell things very strangely in the show, but hey. So anyway, he calls Hodor. It's our first introduction to Hodor, who comes and helps Bran out of bed and everything, and you'll see that Hodor is going to be Bran's constant companion throughout the series from what we've seen so far. He's the one that like helps him get around and everything. So Hodor comes in, and he comes to get Bran, takes him down to see the visitors, and it's Tyrion Lannister, who we had seen leaving the wall with Yoren in the last episode. And Jon asked him if he'd be stopping in Winterfell, and he said yes. And this time when he arrives, Robb is very cold to him. He does not seem to enjoy his presence there at all. And Tyrion, of course, picks up on this pretty quick and wants to know what's changed, because last time he was there, he didn't see any of that, really, because that was when he was there with the King's Party. Oh, and we also see Robb's wolf, Grey Wind, for the first time, I think, since he's a puppy. So Tyrion comes in, and he wants to talk to Bran, and he wants to know what Bran has remembered about the fall. And Maester Luwin pretty much jumps into the conversation and says, oh, he doesn't remember anything. So apparently Bran had told Maester Luwin that he doesn't remember what happened that led to him falling. So that's what Tyrion basically wanted to know. And this leads to also title placement, when Tyrion calls Bran a cripple, and Bran says, I'm not a cripple. He's like, well, then I'm not a dwarf. My father will be delighted. Another fun line. And he gives Bran these blueprints for a saddle that he would be able to ride even without the use of his legs. And that brings Bran around, and he's like, will I really be able to ride? And Tyrion says, yes, if you follow the blueprints and start with a young horse, you'll really be able to ride. So Bran's happy about that. And Robb finds this strange. He's like, because at this point in time, Robb thinks that the Lannisters are behind the attempt on Bran's life, and I'm pretty sure at this point he might have heard that the dagger supposedly belonged to Tyrion, but either way, even if he hasn't heard that part of it that Baelish told Cat, he believes that the Lannisters are responsible for the attempts on Bran's life, and he wants to know why Tyrion is being nice to Bran. I mean, why does he care? If his family tried to kill Bran, why would he give a crap? And this is like I said, the title placement, where Tyrion says he has a tender place in his heart for cripples, bastards, and broken things. Another great line that Tyrion has. Then he says that because of the way Robb is behaving and not being very friendly towards him, he says he'll just go stay at the brothel and they'll both be happier. And he goes outside and runs into Theon Greyjoy, and they have a little bit of a conversation here about Theon is called a captor by Tyrion, that he is a captor of the Starks. And they go into a little bit of talk here about the Greyjoy Rebellion. Now, that is what happened 9 years ago, which was the last time, we get the idea that that's the last time Robert and Ned were really together before the start of the season. So, Theon's father, Balon, and Balon's brothers, Euron, Aaron, Victarion, those are the three. I'm not sure if all three of them were involved in the rebellion, but those are his uncles. So his father Balon and his uncles and his older brothers took up arms against Robert and tried to take over the kingdom from Robert, and were basically pushed back and destroyed by Tyrion's father's forces. Tywin, Tyrion's father, he's a strong military man, as well as being the richest man in the kingdom and the father of the queen. And yeah, Tywin, he's like the Donald Trump of Westeros, if you throw in military skill as well. So anyway, they talk a little bit about Theon's brothers were killed in the rebellion, and then as punishment for rebelling against the crown, Theon was taken captive by Robert's right-hand man, Ned Stark, to ensure that Balon would not rise up against the crown again. So that's a little bit of history of how Theon ended up there, and how it all led to that. And then we go back to our training at the wall, and we meet Samwell Tarly for the first time. And he's obviously a bigger guy, and they're all making fun of him and calling him Piggy and taunting him. And Alliser, that's Alliser Thorne, the guy who trains them, and Alliser, there's no T in his name. For those of you that keep calling him Alistair, it's Alliser. A-L-L-I-S-E-R. But anyway, Alliser tells them all to, teach Sam how to fight, or fight with Sam, train him. And they're all kicking the crap out of Sam, and he's rolling around on the ground and crying and saying he yields, and he doesn't want to fight. He doesn't even try to fight back. Jon's watching this. He's like, what? What is this? They're all kind of saying that, like, you won't even fight back and you've joined the Night's Watch? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's basically just our introduction to Sam, and we see how he's not really cut out for the Night's Watch, so to speak. And Rast, if you go back to the previous episode when they were all ganging up on Jon after training, and I said that Pip and Gren, Tyrion told about how they had hard lives, but then Rast wasn't mentioned there. Rast was one of the rapists who Jon met on his initial trip to the wall. So Rast isn't one of the hard luck stories. Rast is just a rapist. He's a jerk, and he's... But Pip and Gren, they had, sad stories that led to them being there. And so Jon is now friends with Pip and Gren, and Rast is still causing trouble. He does that a lot. So he's not a very nice character. I mean, you can tell that, it's Jon, Pip, and Gren, and then Rast is not really part of their little clique, so to speak. So, our introduction to Samwell Tarly, and he says that he is... Oh, yeah, the other part of the scene is, Jon is like, he yielded, stop beating on him, and Alliser makes it into kind of a little game. He's like, okay, fine, just get past the bastard, and then we'll see what happens. So then he makes them all fight against Jon, who's trying to defend Sam, and of course Jon kicks all their butts again. And then we find out that Sam says, well, I'm a coward, I've always been a coward. And it's just an introduction to Sam, and seeing how he really doesn't fit in there, and Jon's trying to protect him, but it's how far is that gonna go, because it's still the Night's Watch. He's still gonna have to fight sooner or later. So anyway, let's see, we go after the scene. There's a couple more caps covering Sam's introduction. But after this, we're going to go back to Daenerys and the Dothraki. Now, at the point that we see them again after this scene's over, they're traveling towards Vice Dothrak. That is the place you see in the map at the beginning of the show, with the two horses that come up from the map, and you actually get to see those two statues, the horses, right there they are. And that is the entrance to the Dothraki headquarters. I think it's their holy city or something along those lines, I think they call it at some point. So they're arriving there. They're really nomadic people, but this is their home base for when they're not out raiding and everything. So we get here, and Viserys is not impressed. He says it's just a pile of mud, and calls them savages. And Daenerys is like, you shouldn't call them savages. These are my people. And he's like, no, they're my people because I'm the king, and they're gonna be my army. And Drogo's going the wrong way with my army, and he's throwing his little tantrum because I guess Vice Dothraki is the opposite direction of the sea, which is where he wanted to go to get across to go back to Westeros. And he's saying they're going the wrong direction, taking us to this pile of mud. They're savages. They don't know what they're doing, and this is a pain in the butt because they're supposed to be, fighting for me and all this stuff. So, and then in this scene, Dany's like, he isn't going to, well, could my brother actually take Westeros, is what she asks Jorah, and she said even if Drogo gave him an army. And he said that the Dothraki won't cross the sea, and she's like, but if they did, and he said, well, Robert is a big enough fool to try to fight them, but the men advising him are smart because he knows these men and he used to fight with them and everything. So he's like, Robert would try to fight you, but he would be advised otherwise. So it's not just fighting Robert that you'd have to deal with. It would be all the men advising him as well, which include Ned Stark and Barristan Selmy and all them, who Jorah used to know because he fought in the Greyjoy Rebellion, I believe. Alright, so anyway, this is the Viserys and Doria, their lovely bathtub scene, which is one of the scenes that are always included in the phrase that they always used about the first season of Game of Thrones, the sex position scenes, where they're giving history, but they're doing something sexual at the time. I guess they think, for the casual watcher, they don't really care about the history, so we gotta give them something else to look at, but I care about the history, obviously. So anyway, Doria and Viserys are having a little chat about the dragons. Now, the dragons were a real thing. They are basically how the Targaryens came to rule. Originally, they had dragons, they rode dragons. That's how they, captured the Seven Kingdoms in the first place. And Doria is really interested in these dragons and wants to know all about them, and if Viserys has seen them, and she says that she's always wanted to see a dragon because anywhere they are, they can just fly away and be anywhere else they want to be, and they can kill. And so you get the idea. Doria's a real dragon fan. But and Viserys tells her how the breath of the first dragons forged the Iron Throne, which were supposed to be the swords of all of the enemies of Aegon the Conqueror. And the dragon fire melted all of the swords into a throne like so many candles, and she drips the candle wax on Viserys, and he says, ow, gets burnt by the candle wax. But anyway, that actually is important, something to keep in mind for later episodes. But anyway, and he says about how as the dragons started to die out, they got smaller and smaller, and the last one was only the size of his skull was only the size of an apple. And he talks about how the dragon skulls were kept in the Red Keep, and he thinks or assumes that Robert, had them all smashed to dust when he took over because they represent the Targaryen rule. And that's where Doria's like, that's very sad. And he says, yes, it is. Did I hire you to make me sad? And Doria says, well, no, you hired me to teach your sister. And this ticks off Viserys. He's like, what? You think I hired you for Dany? No. No, that's not why I hired you. I didn't hire you to help Dany make her husband happy, you little idiot. And, Viserys goes back to being Viserys. He was almost human for a moment when he was talking about his ancestors and the dragons, but now he's back to being Viserys. But anyway, so that's the little, we get a little background about the dragons and the Targaryens and the fate of the dragons a little bit in that little scene. So it did serve a purpose other than, oh, look, they're in a bathtub. So anyway, that was that scene. And then we go back to the Septa Mordain and Sansa in the throne room. And we're trying to get more of a history lesson. Septa's trying to teach her about the history of Westeros a little bit. And all Sansa is talking about is, what if when I marry Joffrey I only have girls? Then everybody will hate me. And Septa says, well, nobody could hate you. Really, Septa? You need to read some of the YouTube comments. Sansa's not very popular. But anyway, she says that it'll be highly unlikely that you'd have all girls, and nobody could hate you. And Sansa says, well, Joffrey hates me. And the Septa's like, are you still talking about that stuff with the wolves? You know, get over it. But we see that Sansa is, she thinks Joffrey hates her, whatever, big loss. And she also mentions that her grandfather and uncle were killed in the throne room. So you can see that she's kind of getting scared for herself as well. But then when you think that maybe she feel bad for Sansa, she goes back to, well, I'm never going to forgive my father for killing Lady. Okay, Sansa. But nobody could hate you, Sansa. Okay. Anyway, like I said, not a Sansa. Alright, we go back to our next small council meeting. We meet Janos Slynt for the first time. Get to know him later. Yeah, not a fan of him either. But anyway, he's the leader of the City Watch, which is like the city guards. The ones who protect the outer walls of the city and the city streets. We got the King's Guard inside, but then no. And he's talking about how because of so many people being in the city, crime is getting out of hand and everything like that. And Ned goes back to, you know, he doesn't want anything to do with this tournament, but he says, okay, we'll find you more people to help protect the city, and Baelish, you'll find the money for that. And Baelish is like, oh, I will. He's like, well, you found money for the tournament, you're gonna find money for that. And Ned also gives Janos Slynt some of his household guard to help with that too. And so they're just basically more about the debt and the fact that the tournament is bringing lots of people to the city, and it does raise money, but it also causes other problems. So that's basically just a little bit of background on the way the tournaments work and the effect they're having on everything in the city right now. And then at the end of the small council meeting, Ned wants to talk to Pycelle about Jon Arryn's death. After everybody else leaves, he wants to know why Arryn was talking to him, because Pycelle said that Arryn sought his counsel on many occasions or something. And he's like, why? And Pycelle gets all offended. He's like, I've served many kings, blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, anyway. Not a fan of Pycelle either. There's a few people I don't like on this show. But anyway, so after this, he wants to know, what did Jon want the night before he died? And Pycelle says that he wanted a book. He was looking for a book, which sounds kind of strange, but it turns out that the book he was looking for is the histories and lineages of the Seven Kingdoms. Now, this is a book that basically, it's like a compilation of all the family trees of the noble houses, and descriptions of the people in the families and how they died and when they were born, and all this. It's kind of city records, a census of sorts almost, but it's only talking about, you know, the noble houses, because, you know, nobody cares about the peasants, the lowborn, the common people. So anyway, and Ned wants the book, because he's like, well, why did Jon want a book like that before he died? That seems kind of strange. And he asks Pycelle if there's anything strange about the way Jon died, and if it could have been something other than just the fever that supposedly killed him. And Pycelle's like, what? And Ned's like, maybe poison. And Pycelle's like, oh, that's absurd, you know. And Ned I think it's Ned that says that it's often said that poison is a weapon of women, because you can see that he has his suspicions about Cersei. And then Pycelle's like, oh, women and cravens and eunuchs. Did you know Lord Varys is a eunuch? Now he's trying to, point fingers at other people and stuff like that. So, Pycelle's playing the, that's ridiculous. Couldn't possibly be poison. And if it was, I'm sure it was somebody like Varys. Yeah. Okay. So, you can see Pycelle, I'll get tired of him. If you don't, well, kudos. Okay, so we go back to Arya trying to balance on one foot. It's part of her water dance training, and she's talking about Syrio says this and Syrio says that, and he told her to go chase cats because cats are quick and like shadows, and you gotta be smart to catch them and all this stuff. She's basically idolizing Syrio at this point because, hey, he's teaching her what she always wanted to know. So, then Ned sits down and has a chat with her, and she asks, well, now that Bran's awake, is he going to come live with us? And Ned's like, oh, I don't think so. He's never going to walk again. And she's like, oh, he wanted to be a knight of the Kingsguard. He can never do that now, can he? And so you can see Arya's thinking about her brother and his fate. And Ned tries to reassure her that Bran could grow up to be a great lord of a holdfast, or sorry, cat jumping on notebooks. He says that he could be a lord of a holdfast, or maybe a great builder like Brandon the Builder, who is I think the most ancient of the Stark relatives. He's actually the one who built the wall thousands of years ago. So anyway, Brandon the Builder, Brandon Stark, was a Stark relative, and he was responsible for building the wall. Okay, so anyway, there's another little bit of a history. And she says, well, I want to, Bran can't be a knight anymore, and he says, well, we could be a lord of a holdfast, and she said, could I be a lord of a holdfast? He's like, no, you'll marry a high lord, and you'll have sons, and they'll run the holdfast. And he's like, no, that's not me. And she gets back up and goes back to her training. So, yeah, doesn't want to hear any of that. So then we go back to the wall. And Jon and Sam on top of the wall. Sam's been assigned to go keep watch on top of the wall with Jon. And Jon's like, okay, seriously, why are you here? You don't belong here. This is not a place for a coward. Not a place for somebody who is afraid of heights and can't see that well and doesn't want to fight and blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't be here. And then Samwell goes into this story about how he came to be at the wall. And it's one of the best, backstories in the show. He says that when he turned 18, his father said, you're not worthy of my kingdom, because Samwell was the older boy. I think he has a younger brother. But the Tarleys are really, they're known to be like the best fighters in the Seven Kingdoms. I believe they're from Highgarden, one of the more southern kingdoms. And, well, the Reach, which is, I think, where Highgarden is. But anyway, he says, his father told him you're not worthy. He wanted his younger son to inherit things, which goes against the rules of lineage. And he says that tomorrow we'll go on a hunt, and you'll fall from your horse and have a fatal accident, or so I'll tell your mother. So basically, his father said, either you give up your titles and go to the wall, or I will kill you, because I don't want you to inherit my lands or my titles. And that's how Sam ended up at the wall. Yeah, nice family. So anyway, that's how Sam ended up there. And then he goes and says, Alistair's going to make me fight again, isn't he? And Jon's like, well, that's you're going to have to fight. And he's like, I'm not going to get any better. And Jon's like, well, you can't get any worse. And they have a little bit of a laugh about that and go back to their patrolling. So that was Sam's backstory. And, Jon, the beginning of Jon's friendship with him. And then we go to a walk through the Royal Gardens with Littlefinger, Peter Baelish, and Ned. And Littlefinger's like, oh, I hear you're reading a boring book. So he already knows about the book. And he goes into a story about, well, Ned says, that Jon wanted that book and he wanted to know why. And Littlefinger points out to him that Jon Arryn's squire was knighted almost immediately after he died, which seems peculiar. And he also points out that there's spies all around them, and he has to be careful what he's digging into, because, Ned is trying to get to the bottom of things, and Littlefinger is pointing out, every person you see is a spy. You gotta be more careful with what you're doing here, Ned. And then he talks about how right before Jon Arryn died, he kept going to visit this armorer in the city, and he tells him, I can show you who the armorer is. And Ned's like, oh, I guess I was wrong not to trust you. And Littlefinger has his famous line where he says, distrusting me was the wisest thing you've ever done. Yeah, pay attention to that line, Ned. So anyway, also we get our first mention of Jorah Cassel, and does his last name sound familiar? Jorah is either, I think he's the son or the nephew of Roger Cassel, who's the master at arms that came to Winterfell with Catelyn. Well, Jorah Cassel, I think, is his son, and he's the captain of the guard, and Ned's most trusted ally there in his household guard. So anyway, Littlefinger tells him that he should send Jorah to go talk to Sir Hugh instead of doing it himself because of all the spies, and that people are already talking about, Ned digging into everything. So we get a really, really quick little scene here where Jorah does go to talk to Sir Hugh, and he finds out, well, actually, Sir Hugh doesn't really want to talk to him too much. And just a really quick mention here that Sir Hugh calls him Sir, and Jorah's like, oh, I'm not a knight. That's actually a religious thing. In order to become a knight, you have to be named in the light of the Seven, which is the widely accepted religion. So the knights all have to follow the Seven. And in the North, they don't. Most of them follow the old gods, the old ways. So that's why none of the people from the North are knights, because most of them follow the old ways. So anyway, just a little reason why Ned's not a knight and Jorah's not a knight. Anyway, so they go and see this armorer, Jorah and Ned, the armorer that Jon Arryn was talking to. And in this scene, we meet Gendry for the first time. That's Gendry. It looks like it should be pronounced Gendry. It's Gendry, but it's Gendry is how they pronounce his name. And Gendry is this armorer's apprentice, and Ned goes there and asks Gendry, why did Jon Arryn talk to you? I mean, what's so special about you? And what did you talk about? And Gendry says that Jon Arryn was asking him about his mother, and what she looked like, and who she was, and all this other stuff. And Ned looks at Gendry and looks him over as he's hearing that Jon Arryn was asking him all about his mother for some reason. And Ned starts to notice that Gendry's like really, really strong, and he's got dark hair and blue eyes, and you can see when Ned starts putting it together, and he realizes that this Gendry kid is one of Robert's bastard children, because remember, Robert's a slut and he slept with just about every woman in the kingdoms. So this is one of his bastard children, Gendry. And for some reason, Jon Arryn went and was seeking out Robert's illegitimate children. So the question is, why? Why was Jon Arryn so interested in finding the king's bastard children? And that leads Ned to trying to figure out what that was all about, and why it was so important to Jon Arryn to find these children. And then once he did start looking through that book of lineages about the way all the family trees and descriptions of everybody, and then he went to seek out Robert's children. Those two things put together, and then you add to the fact that after he started doing this, then he suddenly died. And his squire was suddenly knighted right after he died. So Ned's starting to put things together here. He's like, okay, Jon was looking into Robert's children and the lineages of the kingdom, and then he died. And what's all that about? So then we move into Jorah coming to talk to Robert and saying, he has a message for Robert about, finding this bastard child. And Jaime's guarding Robert's door, and Robert's in there with a bunch of whores. And Jaime's saying, he only does this because I'm on guard duty. He wants to make me listen while he insults my sister and all this. And Jorah wants to give him the message, and from Lord Stark, and Jaime's like, I don't serve Lord Stark. So he doesn't even take the message. Thank goodness. But anyway, he doesn't even take the message. And Jorah is seeing the way he's like talking down to him like he's nobody. He's like, you and I met before. And Jaime's like, oh, I don't remember you. And he says that they actually fought together in the Greyjoy rebellion. So a lot of people were involved in this rebellion. And that's how Jorah got his scar and everything. And we got our first really quick mention of Thoros of Myr. And we meet him, I think, in season 3. Yeah. But as you can see, a lot of these people know each other from this Greyjoy rebellion that happened 9 years before the show, which also led to a lot of people were involved in the fight, and a lot of them, fought against the Greyjoys to, push back the rebellion. So they're all tied together, believe it or not. In one way or another, they've all met at some point, fought in some war together at some point, and so you're going to hear a lot of people refer back to the Greyjoy rebellion, because Jaime was in it, Jorah was in it, Ned was in it, Robert was in it, Balon and his brothers and Theon's brothers were in it, and Thoros of Myr, who we haven't met yet, was in it, and Barristan Selmy was in it, so they were all involved. So that's another little bit of history. We're hearing more and more about this Greyjoy rebellion that happened 9 years prior. So it all comes down to Jaime doesn't take the message, and Jorah wanders off. So after this, we go back to the Wall, where Jon is telling Pip and Gren, you're not going to pick on Sam anymore, okay? Just leave him alone. Just, don't take it easy on him. Don't, beat the crap out of him like you guys were doing today. And he's trying to protect Sam, because he knows that Sam's not good with a sword or fighting and any of that stuff, and he knows why Sam ended up there. It wasn't his choice. He just kind of had no choice. And then Rast is saying, oh, I don't care what you say. If Alistair tells me to fight him, I'm going to slice me off a side of bacon from that piggy, blah, blah, blah. Rast, what a winner. So anyway, Jon just gives him this look like, oh, you are, huh? We'll see about that. And then that leads to our next scene, where Jon comes in while Rast is sleeping, and puts a rope over his mouth and holds him down, while his wolf, the albino wolf, the white one with the red eyes, his name is Ghost. The wolf jumps on top of him and is snarling and growling. There's Ghost. I love Ghost. He's so cute. Okay, so Jon is saying, no, you're not gonna hurt Sam. Got it? Ghost, remind him, you're not hurting Sam. So Jon has definitely taken it upon himself to protect Sam and use his little sidekick Ghost to enforce that as well. And I think Rast got the point. Then we go back to our training, and in the training, Pip and Gren are like, They barely hit him, just like tap him with the sword, and then when he finally, fights back after looking to Jon for reassurance, he smacks him back, and Bran has a funny scene where he like falls on the ground. He's like, I yield. So Pip and Bran aren't even trying to fight him. And Alistair's getting annoyed. Jon finds it amusing. And Alistair tells Rast to fight Sam instead. Rast looks at Jon, and Jon just gives him this look like, yeah, you remember, you're not gonna attack him, got it? So then grudgingly, Rast fakes his way through the fight as well. And at this point, Alistair's like, knowing something's going on. And he's seeing how they're all looking at Jon. And Jon seems amused by the fact that none of them are really hurting Sam. Like, he told them not to. And then Alistair makes the comment at the end of the little training session. He's like, when winter comes, more references to winter and how bad it's going to be, do you want a man at your back or a sniveling boy? So, as much as Alistair is a jerk, he has a point there. They have to know how to fight. They have to be able to look out for each other and protect each other and fight off whatever's coming for them all, which we've already got a few hints and ideas about. And it ain't just the wildlings, everybody. The wildlings, the primitive people. It's not just them that they're afraid of. The wildlings are barely a concern of theirs at all at this point, because they've got bigger things to worry about. And yeah, this is Alistair getting annoyed with Jon. He already didn't like Jon. And I think it's in the scene before this, but Alistair calls Sam Jon's lady love because he's defending him. Alistair's a jerk, but he occasionally has a funny line. So, yeah, anyway, it comes down to Alistair saying, you guys have to know how to fight or you're all screwed. So, that's that little scene. And, after this, our next scene, there's a couple more caps here, but our next scene is going to be, it's going to go back to the Dothraki people. And the scene starts with Viserys dragging Doria through the camp by her hair. And apparently, Doria had went to tell him that Daenerys wanted him to come to dinner that night. And, of course, Viserys takes that as, oh, you're giving me orders again. How dare you? I'm the king, and I'm the last dragon, and now you've woke the dragon. In other words, you pissed him off. So, and Dany's like, I just invited you to dinner, and I wanted to give you these clothes. And he's like, oh, now you're going to dress me like them. He's just not hearing any of it, just being a big old jerk. If I didn't know better, I'd say him and Joffrey are related. they seem a lot alike. But anyway, so she sends Doria away and to talk to her brother, and, I wasn't ordering you. I just, and he gets ticked off about her trying to give him the clothes, and he's like, oh, what, you're going to try to braid my hair now, too? And then Dany says, you've no right to a braid. You've won no victories. Because the braids that the Dothraki have represent their victories, and the longer the braid, the longer they've gone undefeated. So, when she says you haven't won any victories, he gets really ticked, and he's throwing the clothes at her, and he raises his hand to smack her. Like I said, he's abusive, and they don't show it as much on the show as they did in the books, but yeah. And she fights back. She smacks him back. Which is the first time that's ever happened. And yeah, Dany's getting the idea that, you don't have to put up with this crap. You don't have to listen to him. You don't have to put up with him being an abusive jerk. Then she fights back. And in this scene has got one of my favorite Daenerys lines ever. And she says, "The next time you raise a hand to me will be the last time you have hands." Definitely one of my favorite Daenerys lines of all time. Of all time. I love that scene, that line. So anyway, Dany's starting to realize she's got the power and her brother is nothing, really. He's just a spoiled little brat who wants to take the throne. Kind of like Joffrey. So like I said, they have a lot of similarities. So anyway, and Dany's starting to realize, you know, this guy isn't gonna take us home. He's not gonna win the kingdom back for us. He just doesn't have that ability in him. He's just, you know, a ranting little brat who wants the throne and can't actually do anything to earn it himself. So Dany is really starting to realize the truth about her brother and realize that she does not have to put up with this. Go Dany. So anyway, like I said, one of my favorite Dany scenes of all. So anyway, we go back to mess hall duty at the Watch. Jon and Sam are cleaning up after lunch or something along those lines, and they start talking about girls, and Sam's like, yeah, it's not fair that we're supposed to be celibate, because that's part of the Night's Watch vow, that they're not supposed to have wives or children or whatever, and I guess they interpret that as being celibate. But anyway, and he's like, that's not fair. The officers go to that whorehouse in Mole Town, which is the nearest town to the wall. But anyway, and Jon is just looking at him like, why do you care? And he's like, well, I like girls too, just like you. They might like you more. So, yeah. Yes, Jon is easy on the eyes. But anyway, so they have their discussion, and Jon goes into telling him, no, I've never been with a girl either. And Sam's like, what? Really? Seriously? And Jon tells a story, which is, I like this story. He says, he was alone in a room with a prostitute, Roz, R-O-S, Roz, the red-haired prostitute that was with Tyrion, and the one that Theon recommended to him as he was leaving Winterfell. She's like the only prostitute in Winterfell, or the North, or something. I guess she's probably the best-looking one. We'll put it that way. Anyway, so he was alone in a room with Roz, and when it came down to it, he couldn't have sex with her. And Sam's like, what, you didn't know where to put it? And Jon's like, yeah, I knew. But he says that the reason that he didn't have sex with the prostitute, Roz, or anybody for that matter, is because he started thinking about, what if she got pregnant? She'd have another bastard named Snow. Because Snow is the name of all the bastards born in the North. And he said that's not a good life for a child, so I couldn't do that. I didn't want to bring a child into the world just to, you know, live my life and have nowhere in the world to be like me. And so that's kind of a touching little story about why Jon, another part of why Jon went to the wall. And Sam, you know, he can see that Jon's upset about this, and he brings it back to, so you didn't know where to put it. So then they laugh at each other, and that's when Alistair comes in. Alistair. So he comes in, and he's like, oh, you two seem to be having fun. And he starts telling them about how bad things are going to really get. People seem to get really offended when anybody at the wall laughs. I don't know. But anyway, so he tells them that he's been out past the wall for 6 months at a time, and we get our first mention of Mance Rayder, who is the leader of the Wildlings, and we'll get a lot more about him later. But we get our first mention of Eastwatch, which is one of the 3. There's 16 castles along the wall. 3 of them are still manned. The 3 are Castle Black, which is where they are, Eastwatch, and the Night Tower. I know it. I just can't think of it. There's only 3 that are still manned, because they don't have enough people. And Eastwatch is one of those. But anyway, he says that you know, the wildlings, they survive in caves and just wait for the winter to go away, and that's how they make it. But we're out in the open, and it's bad. I mean, it gets really cold. I mean, it's already cold. You can see the snow and everything. It's already cold. And he says it gets even colder and darker, and And when you're out there beyond the wall on patrol, it gets to the point where you're starving and freezing. And, the wind is so strong it yanks trees out of the ground, and you lose a finger if you take off your gloves, and that eventually you starve so bad you end up eating your horses, and then when the horses are gone, you have to eat your own dead. And he's like, oh, we should have had fat boys like you, huh, Sam? We gotta lived on you for a fortnight. And just more winter is coming doom. Winter is bad. It's really bad. And it's not just the weather. It's other stuff too now. And then Alistair, he finishes the scene with, come the winter, you all die like flies, is what he says. So, yeah, winter is bad. So, when somebody they say this, Starks especially, it's their house words, when somebody says winter is coming, they're not just talking about the season. Winter is bad. The season, the weather is bad enough, but now with all this other stuff that's going on up north, winter is bad. When they say winter is coming, it's like, oh, we're all gonna die. They're basically saying that. So, yeah. Oh, and they're still in the summer at this point in time, and you saw how nice the weather is in the summer up north. But anyway, more wintertime doom. Then we go back to the Dothraki, and Dany is really starting to realize that Viserys is an idiot. And she feels bad because she hit him, and she hit the last dragon, and Jorah's like, no, your brother Rhaegar was the last dragon. Viserys is less than the shadow of a snake, I believe he says. And, she says, well, yeah, but he's still the true king. And he said, do you really want Viserys to be king? And she says, no. But, Viserys has been telling her all her life that, the common people are waiting for them to come back, and they're sowing dragon dinners and praying for his return, and they want their true rulers back, the Targaryens. And Jorah says, the common people don't care. They really don't care who's on the Iron Throne. The only thing they care about is surviving, and they don't care who's in charge. They're not waiting for you. They're not waiting on anything. They're just trying to get through the day. And she, and he says, they pray to survive. And she said, what do you pray for? And he said, I pray to go home. And she said, I pray for home too. But my brother couldn't lead an army even if my husband gave us one. He's never going to take us home. So she starts to realize that Viserys is never going to get them home at all. So, yeah. And speaking of home, and the current king, we go back to the Tournament of the Hand, which Ned calls the King's Tournament because he doesn't want anything to do with it. And we see the royal family, and Joffrey and Sansa exchange a couple little looks here. And Joffrey looks away, and Sansa's back to pouting because Joffrey didn't like her no more. Yeah. And then Littlefinger comes in and starts talking to them about Arya asks him why he's called Littlefinger. He tells a story about his nickname, about the islands he comes from, and yeah, whatever, Baelish. And then they start talking. When the tournament starts, it's the Mountain versus Sir Yu. Now, Sir Yu of the Vale, he is Jon Arryn's squire, who was immediately promoted after Jon died. And he's fighting the Mountain, or jousting with the Mountain. And the Mountain is Sir Gregor Clegane. And he is one of the Lannisters' top knights, basically. We'll get more into all the stuff the Mountain does for the Lannisters. But anyway, so it's the Mountain and Sir Yu, and like I said, the Mountain is Gregor Clegane, and if you heard me in the last second episode, Sandor Clegane is the Hound, so they're brothers. And this is where Littlefinger, during the tournament, Littlefinger's sitting with Sansa and Arya, and the Mountain and Sir Yu start jousting, and the Mountain stabs Sir Yu in the throat with his spear, and Sir Yu dies. So let's see. Sir Hugh was Jon Arryn's squire. As soon as Jon Arryn died, he got promoted. As soon as Jorah started talking to Sir Hugh, he got killed by the Mountain. It works for the Lannisters. Moving on. So Sansa's, all freaked. Well, everybody's freaked, but Sansa looks all scared, like he's gonna stab her with the lancer. Okay, anyway, so this is where Littlefinger starts telling Sansa the story of the Mountain and the Hound, and how when they were just kids, the Hound, Xander, was playing with Gregor, the Mountain's toy, and just because he was playing with this toy, the Mountain grabbed him and shoved his face in the fireplace. Burn his face off because he was playing with this toy. The Mountain's a really nice guy, we get from this story. Yeah, I mean, I think they were like 8 and 6 at the time, and the Mountain probably burned his brother's face off for playing with this toy. Hey, the Lannisters love the Mountain, though. He's their #1 guy. Alright, anyway, so a little backstory about the Mountain and the Hound. And, Littlefinger says, don't ever let the Hound hear that you know the story. Not every knight in the kingdom, or every knight in the kingdom can save you if he found out you knew about why he's all burnt up and everything. So, Littlefinger telling his little ghost story or whatever to Sansa, Anyway, you can tell I really love Littlefinger and Sansa and the Mountain and the Lannisters, can't you? So anyhow, the next scene, let's see, where are we going after this? Alright, our next scene is going to be, back in Ned's quarters, and, Cersei comes in. And this scene is, well, we have a little bit more of the tournament here, but, the next scene will be Ned in his quarters, and they show the book that Ned has been reading about, the lineages of the great kingdoms and noble houses and all that. And Cersei comes in, and in this scene we get one of our iconic Cersei lines. But anyway, so she comes in, and she says, "You're missing your tournament." It's like, it's not my tournament, but she comes in, she says, we should just put this business with the King's Road behind us, and I was rash when I decided to kill the wolves, and, she's trying to kiss his butt, I guess. And she's basically trying to, fill him out and find out what is he trying to find out. Because, with the way the spies are all over the place, she already knows that he's been looking into the book and Robert's bastards and all this other stuff that Jon Arryn was looking into. And you remember what happened to Jon Arryn and the conversation that Jaime and Cersei had. But she asks Ned, "Well, what do you want? Why are you here?" And he's like, "I was asked to do this job, and that's what I'm going to do." And she's like, "You just take orders. You're just a soldier, aren't you?" And he says, "Oh, I was also trying to kill my enemies." And she says, "As was I." That famous Cersei line, "As was I." So yeah, that's a little moment basically saying Cersei knows that Ned's been looking into stuff, and she's giving him veiled threats saying, knock it off. Don't be looking into anything. So, we got that. And then we go back to our last scene of the episode. We're back at the inn at the crossroads. Remember how I said in the second review that everybody's going to end up there sooner or later? So Tyrion and Euron have arrived at the inn at the crossroads, and Catelyn and Roderick are there. Because Tyrion is traveling back from the Wall, and Catelyn is traveling back from King's Landing, and they both end up there at the same time. And also, the first time we meet Bran, that's Bran. You will probably learn to love Bran. Everybody loves Bran. But anyway, so Tyrion gets there at the same time Catelyn's there. And keep in mind that this is after Catelyn left King's Landing and Baelish told her that this dagger belonged to Tyrion. Yeah, this is gonna go well, huh? So they end up there at the same time. And Catelyn starts doing this whole thing where, well, Tyrion recognizes her. She was trying to hide under her. Sorry, my sound cut out. But back to what I was saying. Catelyn is trying to hide behind her scarf so Tyrion doesn't recognize her, but he recognizes her anyway. And she does this whole thing. Well, he actually brings up that, oh, you weren't at Winterfell. What you doing here? And Catelyn goes into this big long thing where she stands up and starts talking to all the soldiers that are there. And she starts pointing out that she knows them all their houses, and they are all allies of either the Starks or the Tullys, her original family that she came from. So she points out that these people are all my friends, and I know them all, and they're all loyal to my family, my people. And Tyrion says, well, I envy you all your great friends, but I don't get the point of this. And then she goes into this thing where she says, this man, pointing at Tyrion, came into my house as my guest, and there conspired to murder my 10-year-old child. So, she basically says, to all these people that are her allies, that that's what Tyrion did. And she calls for them to take him into custody so he can await the king's justice, is what she says. So she has them all help her take Tyrion prisoner at sword point. And this is, keep in mind, this is after she had left Ned in King's Landing and agreed to wait for Ned to try to get some proof of the Lannisters' guilt. But then she runs into Tyrion, and that plan goes out the window, so to speak. I know, horrible pun, horrible. But anyway, so she basically takes Tyrion Lannister prisoner while her husband and her 2 daughters are in King's Landing with the Lannisters. I'm sure it will all go very, very well, and nothing bad will happen, right? So anyway, that is the end of the episode. Catelyn has taken Tyrion Lannister prisoner, and everybody in King's Landing knows that Ned's looking into the Lannisters as well. So, where's it gonna go from here is the question. So that's how our 4th episode of Season 1 ends. And, I guess most of the episodes do end with cliffhangers like that. And we'll have to see where it goes in the 5th episode. We're actually almost halfway through Season 1 already, amazingly so. So, summary, we see that, Bran is having dreams about 3-eyed ravens, and that's a little strange. And we also meet Samwell for the first time, and Jon becomes friends with him. And then Dany starts to stand up to her brother and realize that he's never gonna actually become the king he thinks he's gonna become. Get our background about the Greyjoy Rebellion and the dragons, and Sansa still ticked Ned, and Ned finds out about this book and looks into Robert's bastards and how all that's gonna go. So this is where all of our characters left at this point, and we get to see where it's gonna go from here. And I'm just hoping it's recording now, because it said cut off my sound after the 1 hour mark. I didn't know that there was a time limit on sound. But hopefully we'll get the 5th one out to you in the next day or 2, I hope. I'm not sure. Things are kind of crazy around here, and like I said, I can only do it when nobody's here to interrupt me and make noise and all that. So I will try to get the 5th one out to you as soon as possible. And then we'll be halfway through Season 1. And hopefully you guys will tune tune in for the next one and all the rest. And I'm going to really try hard to get us all caught up to the end of Season 4 before Season 5 begins, but we've still got a lot of time before that. Season 5 won't be starting until March or April. So, keep watching, and I'll keep trying to give you my thoughts and insights and some backstory you don't necessarily get from the show. And hopefully you'll enjoy it. And like, comment, subscribe. I do have comments set to approval, but that's just because I don't want trolls and spoilers. And I do look at the website pretty much every day, so it shouldn't take too long for your comment to show up. So like it, subscribe it, comment, and tune in for the next one. Thanks all.